Great. If you're looking at this, you're part of the Work Term Prep course, and we're doing interviewing 3. Um, just want to touch base with you around the best way to go about interviews and maybe de-stress a little from the whole interview feeling of adversarial relationships. Certainly, if you can think of going to an interview, if you've been on an interview before, you think about those difficult questions and sitting down and having these people answer you, and this can be an anxious situation. For the class portion, we wrote down some difficult questions, and hopefully we have time to cover it. Let's move forward. Today we're going to discuss a little bit about interview success, some difficult questions, some interview techniques, and some bit of we probably won't do the interview exercise, but we'll talk a little bit more about asking questions. Moving forward, a lot of people look at this and we think that's what an interview is. He looks pretty scary. Interviews can be pretty scary, I guess. Um, Interviews can be tough, but they don't have to be scary. I want to add really quickly that what we find is that finance interviews, maybe a higher level finance interviews, can be adversarial in nature. The interviewer can come off or appear to be challenging, um, potentially rude at times, but demanding in many ways, shape, or form. Most of the interviews that you're going on for first work term positions, even in finance, you're not going to find that. This is our image of an interviewer, but really, it's more like this. Interviewers want you to be successful, and they want you to do well. I mean, this is an interview is an opportunity to have a conversation and build a relationship with the organization and with the employer. This is a chance to show your talents. You've worked really hard in school. You went through all those years of high school. You've studied hard. And now this is an opportunity for you to realize and demonstrate some of those talents that you do have. To me, it's an exciting time in the interview. Um, I mean, if you've got to the interview, you must have already done something right, or you would not have gotten the interview. You must have done something really well, because if they didn't think you could do the job, your resume or your application would probably be in the blue recycle bin in their office. Um, this is a chance for you to find a little bit more about the culture of the environment of the organization you might be going into. So remember, you're halfway there. They already think you can do the job. It's time for show your talents. Try to relax. It's important to be as relaxed as possible. I know I say this, but I'm sure, even though I'm telling you to be relaxed, you're probably still going to be a little stressful. Most people interview poorly. Many people are stressed throughout their interview anyways. So don't be afraid to breathe deeply during an interview. Get there early. Take time to consider answers. Don't panic. If they ask you a question that you don't know, don't panic. I mean, later I might touch upon this a little bit later, but it's okay to take a second to say the interview. If they ask you a question you don't know, I'm not sure what that is. Can you give me a second to think about the answer? And taking 5 seconds or a few seconds to discuss that. Um, and don't be afraid to ask them for clarification, or to rephrase the question. Your mind is sort of like a search engine, I guess. I mean, let's take Google, for example. If you were looking for red bicycles, or you're looking to find a place where you could buy red bicycles, you probably type into the search engine, red bicycles. And what comes up is the a play about a red bicycle that's playing in Amsterdam. And what else comes up is Red Bicycle Restaurant, which is in downtown Toronto. What also comes up is um, how a red bicycle is made. None of these things are what you're looking for. Well, if you're going to try to find what you want to be able to do is change your retrieval system. So you might put in, where can I buy a red bicycle? And your results will probably yield what you're looking for. The same is true when you're asked a question that you don't know. If as long as you don't panic, you can ask them to rephrase. And often, 9 times out of 10, with that rephrase, you're able to go back into your brain and retrieve that specific example of what you're looking for. Now, if you panic during the interview, you won't be able to take those steps to retrieve that information from your brain. Okay? Remember, the interviewer wants you to do well. They want you to do as best a job as you possibly can do during the interview. It's in their best interest. They rather choose from 5 really strong candidates who interview well than 5 candidates who don't interview well. So they want you to do well, you want to do well. In a lot of ways, you're on the same side of the table. Even though you're sitting opposed from each other, you're on the same side because your goals are the same, to do well. And that's why I guess this person is smiling in this case, because maybe she knows. So what to do here? Remember, if you want any information about finance interviews, when you're seeking, you can talk to us in the co-op coordinators about that. But really, I want to talk a little bit more about tough questions. And one of the typical tough questions, probably the most repetitive question, the question you ask the most, is this one. Tell me about yourself. If you've ever been on an interview, you've probably got this question. The typical thing here is, what do you do? Many people panic. This question can be asked many different ways. It also can be asked, walk me through your resume. Very similar question, different approach, but trying to elicit the same responses to me. What you want to be able to do right away is you want to keep that answer to 90 seconds or less. Okay? This is an opportunity for you to prepare beforehand. I want you to rehearse this answer because it's probably the most popular question that interviewers ask, and it's a question that students, almost anybody, struggle with because it's hard to talk about yourself. What you want to do is provide a synopsis of yourself. You want to talk about your unique selling proposition. If you're into branding, you want to talk about your own personal brand. You want to talk about what major benefit you might offer to the company. You might want to prepare 3 steps and put them together. Work out 3 most important qualities of the job and begin your answer by stating that you have these qualities and connecting those ideas. You might want to talk about what you're doing currently. Currently, I'm a U of T co-op student. You might want to talk about your long-term career plans, briefly, of course, because if your long-term career plans are congruent or in line with the job that you're seeking, they may think that you're more motivated for the job. I would encourage you to demonstrate specific knowledge of the industry and the company. Say why you want to work for the particular company and show enthusiasm around that. Enthusiasm and energy is something that people are looking for, and you can set the tone with this question, answering the question very early. Certainly, if you want to be a circus juggler, the person who juggles in a circus, and that's your long-term career goal, and you state that during the tell me about yourself, they may question your motivation to work at IBM or with SoftChoice or any number of companies that we post jobs with. Certainly, you want to think about your career goals, and you want to keep them in line with the job as much as possible. What things that you should not do during this part? Don't just show interest in only yourself. Don't discuss how much you're going to learn from the job in great detail, and that's why you're applying. Certainly, organizations are aware that you're going to learn, and it's okay to make a brief statement about that. But spend more time thinking about, how you're going to contribute. Don't go on too long. 90 seconds, maybe 2 minutes tops. Even then, you're kind of pushing. But you want to keep it between 60 and 90 seconds as much as possible. Don't forget to make eye contact. You're looking at this picture, and if this person has got those eyes, he's completely focused on the interviewee in this case. You want to use that same type of thing. No death stares. You're not trying to stare right through them, but you want to talk to the person. You're having a conversation here. So that would be the focus during that tell me about yourself question. But there are others. For example, strengths and weaknesses. We all have them. And we all have weaknesses, certainly. But employers like to ask the question, what's your greatest weakness? Tell me about your weaknesses. Certainly, let's talk about strengths first. You want to align your strengths with the job as much as possible. You can talk about some of your background, where you got your strengths, and why they apply to the position, and how your strengths will make you a valuable contributor to the company or organization. Strengths are pretty straightforward, but weaknesses, what do we do about that? I don't want to tell them that I don't know stuff. I don't want to tell them I'm not strong in one particular area. Knowing your weaknesses is a good way of showing that you're self-aware. And self-awareness is something that employers actually routinely look for in employees. So it's okay to talk about your strengths. But how do you choose which weaknesses to talk about? Well, only talk about the weaknesses, forgive me, that you're working on. Okay, if you're not currently trying to improve that weakness, don't choose it for an interview. Try to pick something that you already have started making improvements to. A good example is English. Many students' first language is not English. It might not even be your second language. But certainly you might be not confident in the English language. You might want to choose it as a weakness. So if I were going to do that during an interview, I might say, one of my weaknesses is I'm not confident speaking English. So what I've done is I've joined the Communication Cafe. I've joined Toastmasters. And certainly I have English-only evenings with my friends where from 5 to 8 o'clock at night, all we do speak is English. All we speak is English. Even though we can speak our native language, we try to speak English during that program, during that time of the evening. Now, certainly, right now it's something I don't feel confident about, but I'm going to try to turn this to a strength in the future. So my weakness is to turn to strength. So in that way, you're not just saying, oh, my weakness is English, period, because that leaves things on a negative note. You don't want to answer your questions and leave them on a negative note. You've all seen a sine curve before, but really where the star is, in the positive areas, where you want to leave your answer. If you're tracing down that period, that area below the line, in that negative area, you don't want to leave your answer there. You always want to talk about how you can improve, what you need to do to, what you're working on, and what your learning points are. In class, we did a little exercise with students about breaking up into groups of 2s or 3s and answering these questions. What is your greatest weakness? And tell me about a time you were working on a project or assignment and it did not work out the way you had hoped. Okay, we spent 15 minutes doing this in class. I'm going to try to get through this a little shorter time period because you may not have a group that you're working with. But if you have other students you want to try this with, go right ahead and do so. If not, what's your greatest weakness? We talked about how to answer that question. Not ending on a negative, talking about how you're working on improvements, whether that be taking Excel courses if your weakness is Excel, whether that be independently reading marketing journals, if your knowledge of the marketing industry is one of your weaknesses. It's up to you. Now, tell me about yourself question. If you look at that question, what type of question is it? Situational? Behavioral? Open-ended? Close-ended question? For those of you who said behavioral, you'd be correct. So, and there's a certain structure in answering a behavioral question. Do you remember what it is? Situation, task, action, result. Yeah, the STAR method. Using the STAR method is the appropriate response to answer that question. So tell me about a time when you're working on a project or assignment and it did not work out the way you hoped. You talk about that situation. You describe the action you took. What did you do? I don't want to hear necessarily what the group did. What did you do? You want to be as specific as possible when you're answering behavioral questions. You talk about the task and the action and the result, but the result, by definition, if you look at this, part of the result is negative. If the situation didn't work out the way you wanted it to. So what do? Remember that sine curve. You don't want to end in that bottom trough area. You want to look back. You want to look at it and think, I want to end it positive. Learning is always positive. So going back to the question, you're working in a group assignment, it wasn't working out, you took these steps, it still didn't work out, and the result was the group underperformed. If you're answering this question, and you can also say, what I learned from that situation is that organization is important. I have to properly organize myself in the group. If I had taken the steps early to understand group norms, focus on expectations within the group, I think we could have group goals, superordinate goals if necessary. Maybe we could have worked out things, and I think I'm going to bring that into the job I'm going into. Those planning skills, people understanding their roles, is something that if I was putting a group together, I would make sure that we're there. That's a way of answering that question. You can focus on what you learn. Learning is always positive, even from a situation that may be negative. So if you look at both of these questions, I'm looking for a negative response. But I want to know how you improve things, what you did to work on those things, and what you learned from those situations. Certainly, if you can articulate those things during an interview, it makes for a stronger answer. And remember, if you can't think of a situation, you're sitting there, I can't think of a project or assignment where it never worked out right. Well, what do? Remember, what did we do? First, take a pause. Think about it. Give your brain a chance. Your brain works perfectly well. Probably, if you're in this program, your brain probably works fine. Give it a chance to catch up. So take it a few seconds. Okay, what happens if even after that you can't think of anything? What do? Well, you go to the next phase. You ask for the rephrase. For those of you who are paying attention, you ask to rephrase the question. Now, suppose I rephrase the question and you still can't think of anything. It could happen. Well, what do? Well, an honest answer for me in this case would be, well, I can't think of a situation specifically about that where the project didn't work out. And maybe it's because when I find projects not working very well, I take steps to correct those things immediately. I try to focus on what needs to be done, who needs to do it, and outcomes early, so we can better able to meet our goals and objectives of the group. And by doing this, I haven't had many situations that I can think of where a group hasn't worked out. Now, the question is, did I answer the question if I answered it that way? Well, the answer would be no. Technically, I did not answer the question, but what I did do, though, is provide an answer that gives the employer insight into my character and how I handle situations, and how I've handled situations like that in the past. It's the best answer I can give, and that's only after I tried several different ways to give them the answer that they were looking for. Hopefully that's helpful. Well, let's get to the end of the interview. Let's say you made it through, you did well. When does the interview end? And you're going to hear this a lot. I ask this question a lot. When is the interview over? A lot of people think the interview is over once the interviewer has stopped asking questions. Nay, it continues right through until you've got up and left the building, as far as I'm concerned. Intelligent questions actually show the employer that you're intelligent. So certainly, asking questions that are relevant to the job, provide insights about who you are as a person, show that you want to connect with the individual that you're interviewing with, is really important. You can ask about why a good engagement. I separate that into separate areas. There are engagement style questions, and then there are other questions. An engagement style question is asking the interviewer, what makes IBM so enjoyable to you? Why did you want to become an accountant? What keeps you motivated at work every single day? Questions like that give the interviewer a chance to give a bit of a personal account as to their motivations, where they're coming from, and gives you a chance to, if they say anything you agree with, to mirror that, to say, yeah, I felt the same way, and yeah, I felt the same way. I wanted to become an accountant when I was 11 years old, or maybe grade 11. Whatever they're discussing, it gives you a chance to move forward into more of a discussion. You can ask about how previous students have been successful in this role, but a good structure for me that I've used in the past is a bit of a preamble, a question, and that's been the way I've been asking questions. I'll give you an example. I know that success is really important in this role, and I really want to be successful in this role. I choose not to be just a co-op student. With that in mind, what's your criteria of success? How do I know if I'm successful in this role? It's a very typical question, but structured this way, with a little preamble, and then the question, structured this way, the employer knows what. What did the employer learn about me by me asking that question? Well, what the employer learned was, I want to do well. It's success, and it's really important to me. I may not have had the chance to say that on my resume or during the interview, but now they're getting insight to my passion and motivation for the role. Certainly, asking the wrong questions can have a detrimental effect. Oh, what time do we have lunch? Do I have to show up for work every day? I mean, you might be sending a message to an employer that you're not very motivated about work, that you're looking at other things that aren't your core responsibilities. You want asking about industry, asking about competitors. These are good questions to ask, but just make sure the question and the scope of the question are such that the interviewer can answer it. This is not your opportunity to test the employer of what their knowledge of the company is. It's important that you're still trying to build rapport and you're trying to build that relationship with an employer. So it's not a time to say, I know when this company was founded. Do you know? You're not testing the employer. They didn't come there to be tested. So make sure it's a question that the employer could probably answer. All right, that's pretty much what we did. There's a lot more class interaction, a lot more questions that unfortunately we can't go through. But next week, remember, there's some upcoming events in terms of, I think, student stock senior student mock interviews, easy for me to say, and some more interview practice. Hopefully there's not another snowstorm, so we have to do it again this way, but if not, we'll be able to provide some service for you. If you have any further questions, make sure you can contact Kathleen, and I'm sure you know her email and her extension. And if not, I think she's got office hours, but you can inquire with the co-op office when they are. Thanks for listening, and that's interview 3.